Buenos días, shlama, ilookh, and welcome back, my fellow language learners, to Adventures in Language. I'm your guide, Emily. And in this video, we're talking about 6 easy ways to get yourself over the fluency hump, or as linguists like to call it, the dreaded intermediate plateau. Now, let me guess, you're probably here because you're frustrated at your current fluency level in your target language, right? You might be asking yourself, why am I not making as much progress as I used to be? Is this as good as I'm ever going to get? Rest assured that you are not alone in your fluency frustrations. It's common, very common, to go through a phase where you feel like you're spinning your wheels in the mud. But the good news is you likely won't stay in that phase for long, and I know that because you are here seeking out sage advice to get better, meet your goals, and bust through that intermediate plateau. And for those of you who might not know me yet, I'm Emily. I'm a linguist at Mango Languages with my PhD in bilingual language processing. I'm also a teacher and a student of several languages. So all of that to say that I am very excited that you're joining me on this journey today. Well, Fewa Buenos, let's get to it. First, let's start by defining the intermediate plateau effect. So it's a phenomenon by which the language learner starts out by making really steady progress in the language, but seems to stall out around the intermediate proficiency level. There are several ways that this can manifest. Maybe your vocabulary knowledge isn't growing at the same rate that it used to. Maybe your grammar starts to feel stunted. Perhaps you're noticing that you're tired of having conversations about the weather, but you don't know how to make the leap to conversations about more complex things like emotions and current events. All of these are instantiations of the intermediate plateau, but they don't all have the same underlying causes. In order to figure out how to overcome your particular case of the intermediate plateau, I'm going to walk you through 6 of the most common reasons that learners experience an intermediate plateau, followed, of course, by tips to how to address each one. Okay, potential problem number 1. You're using your go-to grammar as a crutch when speaking. What's the solution? Writing your way to more complex grammar. Let's break that down. By the time we've reached intermediate proficiency, we've built a kind of muscle memory for our favorite grammar structures. You know what I'm talking about. These are the ones that make us sound good in the target language. They make us feel good, so then we keep using them. Now, that on its own isn't a bad thing. But if you rely too heavily on your go-to grammatical constructions, you're not leaving enough room to identify your learning gaps or learn more complex sentence structures. So, writing can be a great way to address this. Why? Because in spoken interactions, we often feel a pressure to get our message across quickly to the other person. So it's really easy to get stuck in a rut of opting for simple sentence structures. Writing, on the other hand, allows you to bypass that social pressure. So try this. Take just 5 minutes every day to free write. And you can do this however you please. This can be gratitude journaling, a personal diary, your to-do list. As you write, you're going to find yourself thinking, I don't know how to say this. Rather than motoring ahead with the simplest approximation, you're going to take the time to look up how to say it, and then you're going to write it out as a full sentence. These little opportunities for learning are where the magic really happens and where progress is made. After each session, go back and reread a journal entry from the week before to reinforce the new grammar structures that you've been learning. Okay, potential problem number 2. You're using too much shallow processing when listening. The solution? Start paying attention to details by keeping a language notebook. So what does shallow processing mean? It means that you're listening just to catch familiar words, not really to absorb new grammatical patterns. Typically, this means you're talking with someone in the target language and you're listening with the intention of just catching the gist of what they're trying to say so that you can find a logical response when it's your turn to speak. Relatable. This can be an effective listening strategy for beginners. But if you want to break through the intermediate plateau, you really need to start paying attention to the details. This means becoming a more active listener. So you might ask yourself, did they use a different word order than I'm used to? How exactly did their tongue move when they pronounced that word? In other words, don't just listen for what they say, listen for how they say it. This might mean that sometimes you do miss the gist of a conversation, but that's okay. It happens. One easy way to become a more active listener is to keep a language journal. This can be physical or digital, and you can use it to store all of your observations, your questions, and your curiosities about the language. Okay, potential problem number 3. Your input doesn't contain enough variation. The solution to this problem is to seek out authentic input from a variety of different sources. So consistency sounds comforting. I agree. But it can become a hindrance to your growth as a language learner. For example, if you're learning exclusively from one textbook or from one teacher, you're only getting one person's version, one person's accent, one person's dialect and speech style. While that consistency can be comforting for a beginner, it's not how language works at scale in the real world. The answer is to get authentic input from a variety of different speakers, different authors, different content creators. And the input should ideally have two characteristics. It should be comprehensible to you, and it should also be challenging for you. Inevitably, this variation of input source will expose you to new grammar and vocabulary that'll help get you to the next level. Plus, research from cognitive psychology has shown that variation in input actually enhances, not inhibits, language learning. Now, one quick and easy way to get that variation in input is through media that you know you already enjoy consuming. So that might be for you action movies, self-help podcasts, YouTube comedy sketches. The point is to strategically consume content from different people. Psst, did you know that the Mango Languages app actually offers 2 different voices from real people for each language to help you with this? Pretty cool, right? Potential problem number 4. You're not getting enough corrective feedback. The solution, quite simple in fact, is let others know that you want to be corrected. So you may be practicing your language a lot, putting a lot of time in, but if it's going into a void, a language learning abyss, if you will, then it's not going to improve at the scale or at the pace that you want it to. So your errors might get fossilized. They might get cemented. What you need in that case is corrective feedback. That is feedback given to correct the errors that you've been making. Now, one of the simplest ways to do this is to tell the people that you speak with that you want to be corrected. And the reason is simple. Lots of people out there by nature are correction adverse, which means that they might need some explicit invitation from you to feel comfortable correcting your speech. And if you want some tips and tricks for how to seek out better corrective feedback, we actually have an entire video dedicated to it, which we've linked for you in the description. And if you want to see corrective feedback in action, then I invite you to check out the Mango Languages app. The Mango app has been designed so that you get the corrective feedback that you need to break through your intermediate plateau. The app uses an error-based learning methodology by which learners are intentionally led to make and discover errors that are common in the target language. And the cool thing about it is that the app follows these errors up with a reassuring grammar note and a simple explanation for how you can fix them. Okay, potential problem number 5. You're focusing too much time on receptive skills. That means reading and listening. The solution? Make time to practice your production skills. That's your speaking and your writing skills. A lot of intermediate learners feel proficient when they're reading or listening, but say they feel instantly inadequate when they're writing or especially speaking. This issue can be exacerbated by the way that you study, the kinds of learning activities that you engage in. For example, if you spend all or even most of your language learning time on reading and listening activities, then of course you're going to fall short or feel inadequate when you try to speak on your own. What you need in that case is to practice producing. So the best way to overcome this is, of course, to find someone to speak with. Now, if that is not possible for you, you don't have access to other speakers of the language, you haven't found a virtual or digital community to engage with, then try simply talking out loud to yourself. It really does work. For more tips on how to integrate speaking activities into your language learning practice, check out the Fluency Illusion video, which we've linked for you in the description. And before we get to our last point, if you're new here and you'd like to make sure that you're up to date on all of the awesome language learning content that we have for you, then join the Mango fam by subscribing to the channel. Okay, so the last point that we're covering today has to do with motivation. Now, this can be a really common explanation for why you're experiencing your intermediate plateau. Perhaps you have lost sight of your motivation for learning the language. The solution is to reconnect with it, and you can do this by reflecting on your goals. Now, there are many possible motivations for learning language. It might be for school, for career advancement, for connecting personally with someone. Whatever that may be for you, you need to be able to define your why. Because as it turns out, clarity and motivation is tied to positive learning outcomes in the target language. And you may be surprised to find that over time, your motivations for learning your language have changed. And that's good to know. If you like a worksheet to guide you in pinpointing what your primary motivators are, then check out the Setting Good Goals worksheet that we've linked for you in the description of this video. Oh, and one more thing. Keep in mind that it's quite possible that you've made more progress than you realize or give yourself credit for. When it comes to language learning, it's not uncommon to experience a disparity between perceived competence and actual competence. Think back, for example, to what you couldn't do in the language when you first started out. Enjoying the progress that you've made so far is going to help fuel you forward. So give yourself a pat on the back. I hope you've gotten some good food for thought on how you're going to get through your intermediate plateau. I recommend just tackling one point at a time. Remember, Rome wasn't built in a day, neither was anyone's L2 proficiency ever, so you'll get there. Well, my fellow language learners, that's all for this time on Adventures in Language. If you're new here and you'd like to make sure you're up to date on all of our awesome language learning content, then come join the Mango fam by subscribing to the channel. And if you really loved it, then give us a like and hit that notification bell so you never miss another video from us. And as always, if you have a question or an idea for a video that you'd like to see from us, let us know in the comments. We're always listening. Well, nos vemos, posh, bishlama, and I look forward to hanging out with you here next time. Bye. This is your friendly reminder to not forget to sign up for your free Setting Good Goals worksheet, which you can access through this link on the screen right now. In next week's video, we're covering tips and tricks for how you can have less awkward conversations in your target language. If you want to be the first to know when that video is released, because it's a good one, then get subscribed to the channel and go ahead and ring that notification bell. Bye.